Thank you very much, and thank you very much for being here at 9 o'clock this morning on the first day of the conference. You'll see that I'm being powered by coffee, and I'm going to give you a caveat emptor up front. I finished writing this in the early hours of this morning because this was a last-minute change to the schedule, as some of you may have noticed. A week ago, this was not actually up on screen as being what was going to be delivered in this slot. Hopefully, you've read the outline. I'm going to tell you now, it was a very ambitious outline. I don't expect us to get through every single one of those topics, but my key goal today is if you've never used Prefect before, you will have used it in multiple different ways and talking to, hopefully, cloud services and other things going on to give you that launch pad into how to get going, such that later on you can learn a few more of those advanced things that I'll mention, but we won't probably get into actually coding. There's going to be a lot of practical, where I'll be showing and walking through code examples, but also hopefully you'll have an opportunity to follow along. I appreciate very much that I couldn't get a full set of instructions out because, as I said, I finished writing it yesterday. Thank you to the people who put in bug reports already in the last 24 hours on the fact that I had conflicts in some of my requirements files. They should now be fixed. Fundamentally, all of the code you're going to see is available from this repo. There is a full solution set there, so if I screw up anything in the live coding examples, the full solution pieces should work that I can either bail out to or, again, you can run in your own time. As a show of hands, right, first of all, hands up if you have the intention to try and follow along and do some coding in this session. Keep your hand up if you've managed to do all of the things I've asked you to do in advance, if you'd seen the register with Upstash, download some Docker Compose files. Okay, right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump to the slide deck, which is here, and move into slideshow mode for a little bit. Yes, mastering data flow. Empower your projects with Prefect's pipeline magic. This is what happens when you ask ChatGPT to try and make your title a bit more interesting. And I thought I'd go with it. Hey, there's enough LLM talks going. How could I not at least use an LLM in passing in this talk? Like I say, the goals of this session are you will understand what Prefect is. You will have built and executed a task in a flow. We're going to get to the point of actually scheduling flows in a form of deployment. And we're going to go through the example of what else can be done. Hopefully you're going to have some fun. I'm going to try and ask a few questions, so if you fall asleep, please wake up, because if it's just me talking or typing for 90 minutes, everybody's going to be really bored of that by the end of it. Before we get started, so yes, we're going to be talking about Prefect, but before we get started, that is the shortcut link if you haven't found the repo already and you need to clone it. I appreciate there are lots of people in this conference already, and I've done this, well, I've been at this event before where everybody goes and tries and does an install live, which is where things get tricky, because it can be a bit slow. So if you haven't already, if you've already downloaded it, make sure you've got the latest and do a git pull to update to the latest version. And I would suggest running now Docker Compose up -- build. That way you will hopefully have, if anything else needs to be downloaded or moved around, whilst I'm talking about my background and giving a bit of context, that will be ticking over in the background. The other two pieces are making sure you have that Upstash and MongoDB Atlas account. They're very quick things to spin up, so they're not a problem. It'll just be a case of going in and registering. Personally, I just did it with my Google ID, and it just went through relatively quickly. But now is the time, so I will leave that up for a little bit longer. At some point, I'm going to say does everybody have the information they need, and then I'll move to a different slide. But I'm going to just keep an eye out how many heads are down trying to do things right this second. OK, if you need me to come back to this slide, I will. But I'm just going to now give you a bit of background about myself, and then we're just going to sort of start talking about things. And hopefully, any code downloads, installs. The one thing I did add, actually, after yesterday is there is now not just a requirements.txt file for your local Python. There's also an environment.yaml file if you're using Conda or Mamba. You can then just use that to get the set of local requirements up. like I say, whoever did report the bug request yesterday, thank you. I'd forgotten that that problem existed, but fortunately Spacey pushed an update out 2 weeks ago, which means that they fixed the conflict, which made hopefully everybody else's life subsequently easier. So we've had a little bit of the introduction, so I like to say that I'm a person with many hats. My day job, as was mentioned, is I'm a senior data scientist at Comply Advantage. You may not have heard of us. It's perfectly feasible. We work in the regulation technology sector. We are building what we'd like to say is the world's most complete knowledge graph for understanding financial crime. We sell services. We have a product that we sell back into payment providers, payment screeners, transaction monitors, know your customer style entities. And so we're doing a load of work on graphs. We have lots of text work. We're doing work with large language models these days. We're doing all sorts of things. And we're up and coming, trying to scale up. Over 500 of us now, spread across the world, but core tech is based out of the UK and out of Lisbon. So that's my day job. That's where I spend most of my time. However, I'm also a long-serving volunteer with a charity called DataKind. Quick poll, who's heard of DataKind in this room? Okay, who's volunteered with DataKind in this room? Okay, everybody go and volunteer with DataKind. I've been volunteering with them for about 9 years now. Anybody who has data skills, you know how in demand you are in the marketplace. Think how hard it is for charities to get access to those skills. DataKind acts as the mediator, the middle ground, and organizes engagements with charity organizations on planned, coordinated sessions that allow us to give back and use our skills to help enhance their stuff. If you're here at last year's conference, I was talking at last year's conference about one of the projects, and that project was where I first started using Prefect in any kind of anger and had to learn about it, which is what led to this year's tutorial. So in some respects, it's the charity work you can thank for me being here talking to you all today. I'm also a recovering astrophysicist. That was my first career for about a decade or so, almost. I've been an entrepreneur in residence sponsored by the Royal Society, which, if you've never heard of it, is a great thing to do. They can buy you out of 20% of your time. They give your company 20% of your salary, up to a maximum of £20,000 per year, and you can spend a day a week over 3 years, pretty much, engaging with a higher education institution, trying to innovate and get them to be a bit more entrepreneurial or bringing in new skills and sectors. You have fairly free form in your proposals. So that was a really good engagement I got involved with, which allowed me to talk about the joys of data science. And then, as mentioned, that is the logo of PyData Southampton. We finally launched officially last year. So all of you now are on my list for you should be submitting talks to come and talk at my local meetup, because that's the one stress I have every month. It's great, a meetup gets delivered, and then I very quickly have to go with, oh my God, I need to find 2 more speakers minimum for next month. Oh God, oh God, oh God. So please help me out there. Oh, is it not coming?
No, it's not coming.
Oh, so, okay, thank you. Okay, I need to move over here because apparently this mic is the one that is picking up the audio right now. If you are interested, I am on Twitter/X. You can find me on LinkedIn. There is a blog which hasn't been updated in a very long time, and maybe one of these days will move along. So that's me. This now is kind of that preview of what Prefect looks like in the context that what we're looking for with Prefect is a way to orchestrate and manage data pipelines. How are we going to get, it's all well and good, someone's gone off and said, hey, I need you to solve this problem. And you go with, okay, let me get a Jupyter Notebook open. And you go through and you code your cells and you go back and you re-edit something. And then, okay, again, bit of interactivity. Hands up if you've done this and you've iterated through, and then you try to run the notebook from start to finish, and it doesn't because actually you changed the order of the things that were happening. Okay, good. Most of you are being honest, I think, because I think actually a few more hands should have been up there. How many of you have then edited that properly such that you know that in 6 months' time it's still going to run, or are you just like, you know what, I've got the result out that I need at the end, and so leave it unmaintained? Hands up again. Okay, good. Still being honest. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with there's a talk that went viral about why I hate notebooks, which is kind of around these principles. I love notebooks because they allow me to experiment, but I equally have learned the hard way that you have to maintain them and you have to look after them. And so that initial experimentation is fine. But if you're now going to move something to production, or in the case that I had a couple of years ago, I'm trying to give something to non-tech experts at a charity, I need to simplify that down and orchestrate it so that it's going to behave in a way I expect it to. And if it's going to fail, I'm going to know where it failed and have some indicator that I can pass on information to somebody that can say, okay, that's why it's gone, that's what I need to intervene with. So this is just a screenshot of this is literally taken off the Prefect docs page. They are very good docs. We will be looking at them a little bit because in part, again, this was a very last minute talk, so I have not been able to go and curate my own full set. But what you see here is you've got some kind of level of dashboarding in itself of showing you how much has been running through the system in the top left. You've got some metrics. You can see what the active worker pools are. In this case, we will not be getting to the level of running something on Kubernetes. I'm sorry if that's your expectation. You're going to be disappointed now. But the whole point is that it's easy and accessible and you're going to get to it. And we're going to do that we have this running locally. So this is, now the way, fundamentally what you're doing is you're creating workflows. And those workflows are going to get broken down into tasks. So this is the simplest, if you like. So the joy, again, the simplicity that Prefect brings you is actually you get to keep pretty much all of your Python code in the exact same way it was in your Jupyter notebook. Although you're probably going to pull it now out nicely into a Python file so that you can more easily run your scripts and get things to talk to each other. But fundamentally, it's these two. 90% of all of the things that anybody's going to do in follow along with this code is you are going to be writing at task and at flow. And that might seem tedious, but the beauty of it is if that's all you've got to do, think of how easy this must be to get this stuff up and running and using it. So the idea is that you should be trying to break down your bodies of code into the smallest chunks available. We could have done inside of the flow. I mean, this is literally a very toy example because you can see the only function inside the flow that it's calling is explicitly the task. And all that's doing is doing a print statement. But the point is that when we come to then look at this later in the management, you're going to see that actually this flow called this task and this task did this. And so you hopefully start to see that if I'm chaining together tasks, I'm then going to get information and feedback at every step if anything went wrong or there was a problem. So it's in the same mindset that many of you may well have been doing in your code anyway, that you actually break it down into simpler functions rather than having one giant function that does 127 different things and then you get all sorts of other problems coming through. So having said that, let's get started. Now we're going to have to do a little bit of work. So let me just get out of the slide show for a second. And I'm going to move over to, so I'm using Visual Studio Code. Oh.
Just one thing, I think in the requirements of TXT, the Python.m version has a typo where it should be 1.0.1, whereas 1.01.
Ah, thank you for that. There's a typo in the requirements file where there's a missing decimal point. It should be 1.0.1. If you've got a problem, please, hopefully you can fix that. Again, my apologies in advance that it's not quite as polished as I would hope. I think I must have been updating. Well, I was definitely updating late last night. So if I move over to Visual Studio Code, where have you gone? So I need to start us off that we've got a little bit of work that we need to do to get started. So I've got just a standalone terminal over here, which I'm just going to clear. So I'm inside. Let me zoom that in a little bit more. Is that enough for people? Can you see that at the back, or do you want to go another level? Yeah. Okay. Good. So I'm literally inside the cloned repo. So you can see inside there we have our base level files. we are going to do Docker, as hopefully you're already doing, Docker compose up. Now, I shouldn't have to rebuild anything because everything should have been built last night. So everything's up and running. So this is running a few dummy services in the background to make all of our lives a little bit easier for having a bit of interactivity. So I'm going to quickly show you some of those so that you know that they're there before we dive into the code, because I don't want you to get confused by what's going on here. So one of the things, and so everything's running off of localhost now, it's being piped through from that Docker set of services, is we have at localhost 8,000. I'm running inside there a fast API, lightweight web API, and it's, if I do get tweet, it is, and I'm going to zoom in again because that's, it will return a sample from the airline's sentiment open source. You may well have come across it in a tutorial on NLP data set. So the idea is this is kind of mocking a service where, oh, there's some kind of message. I'm going to refer to them as tweets. And we're going to go with, oh, but periodically there's a new thing available. This is set up literally that every time you query it, it will get you something new. It is rate limited, so do not try hammering your service, because I did that on purpose for experimental reasons that will hopefully become clear later on. It also, as a warning so you don't think anything's broken, 25% of the time it will return a 404 error. For, again, the same reason I want to mock a real-life service which doesn't always work exactly how you want it to, because we need that, we want that in testing some of our flows and things going forward. So hopefully you can see it's a relatively simple, flat JSON structure that comes back. If you need to remind yourself, you can obviously just go to a browser and be able to visually inspect an output if you need to do it there. The other thing that we have under the hood, which we'll directly explore now, is there is a PostgreSQL database. And that's important because I wanted to take us into a little bit of complexity about what has to run under the hood for Prefect to work. It's all well and good having that giant dashboard, but it needs to be logging things. And so it needs some kind of database. Now, off the shelf, if you just do it in your very first, following the very quick start tutorial, it just does it to a SQL-like database under the hood. But I know that it's fiddly delving into the docs to figure out, how do I actually attach this to something that might be the thing that I want to run in the real world? So I wanted us to, again, step a little bit out of the comfort zone. So we're going to go back to the command line. And, well, actually, I might need to go into Visual Studio Code first, because I think I'm probably still running it all here. Yes, I think I am. Let me stop everything, clear everything. And there should be, I think, if I remember to add it last night, an extra set of instructions called Prefect Server Setup. Yes, this is the document. So I'll leave it here. So as you can see, it's already reminded you, hopefully, that you should have the Docker Compose up and running. So the first thing you want to do is that we need to tell it where the Prefect API is going to live. Prefect, the other option I had for this was that everybody is entitled to a free cloud server version of Prefect. All of their software is open source and available for everybody to use. And as so many of these wonderful companies do, is that the way they make their money is they offer an actual SaaS service on the other side where they do all of the management of the cloud infrastructure. You are, as much as there's a load of extra plugins there, I wanted to give you the native of you're running it on your own architecture so that you're not suddenly thinking, I have to go and pay for Prefect to ever get this up and running or using it. So, but as a result, you therefore need to make sure it knows where to go and talk to things. So the first thing we're going to do is literally, I'm going to copy and paste them one at a time. I've already done this, but just so that you can see it in running, let me just make this a little bit larger. Move this up. So we're just going to run that. I don't think you get any output. It just goes and does its job, hopefully. There we go. Yeah, you get an output set. OK, it's reporting it set that correctly. I'm going to reset the database. Because I was testing last night, I don't know how clean my database is right now, so it may, possibly because an exception occurred. Okay, hopefully that's not a disaster. This is going to be really embarrassing if that is the disaster. So I'm going to, the third command is basically now pointing where the database connection URL should be. Now, that should work for everybody because I set up the credentials inside of your Postgres database. So that should go without a problem. And let me just, this step, the prefect config view show sources is kind of really just the sanity check. Do things look like they're pointing in the right place? So I think the reset -y works if everything's up and running and you're trying to dump and move things, which is why I had it in there just in case I still had anything running. So you can see that our API at least is pointing to the right place. It's hashed out the connection URL because there's a password in there. It should, if it's doing anything sensible, not leak your data. We're not, I should say, we're not really going to get into secrets management too much in this whole piece. I'm going to do bad things and you're going to see some of my API keys, which I will be deleting before this goes online on YouTube, and so nobody can spam any of my services. And I'm going to trust all of you in the room to not just go and try and quickly type down mine. It's a whole other level that if you're trying to go to an actual deployment to actually make sure you lock down all of your secrets. And there are a number of things, and I can kind of show you them if we have time at the end, some of the documentation around how you can get to those pieces. But I didn't really want to waste time on that piece. So if you're expecting that answer right now, there is a solution. It is well documented, but you're not going to see it directly here. So after that, we can then do prefect server start. And hopefully, this is where you pray to the demo gods. And anybody doing a tutorial really has to, hey. There we go. So you can see that it's running locally because it's pointing happily to localhost effectively. We've got the dashboard, and you can see that the API is live. So the dashboard lives at localhost 4200 port. So let's just hop over there for a second and confirm that. So if we go up here and we go to localhost 4200. So yes, yours will not look like that because, like I say, I've been testing and I haven't I clearly have left a cache somewhere of the data store, so I have a load of historic runs. Yours should look completely blank. Does anybody have that already up that they can see that they have managed to successfully get there, or do you want me to, because I'll give everybody a few minutes if you want to make sure that you've got to that point, because if we haven't got the server running, none of the rest of the stuff is going to make a lot of sense. Hands up if you need some more time to make sure that you can see a screen like that. Okay, right. We will take 5 minutes. I will rove around. If anybody's stuck or anything doesn't look like it's working for you, put your hand up and I will come round as best I can. Okay, how are we getting on? I appreciate that everybody is sharing the Wi-Fi and I know there are some installs and things still going on. Are people happy for me to move on a little bit further? Yeah, okay, so hopefully you now know what it looks like when you get your server up and running. We won't dive into anything yet because in theory, if you were looking at yours, it would be blank and so there'd be nothing really to see. So let's not have any spoilers right now. So if we go back into Visual Studio Code, we have Prefect running there. I'm just going to close out other leftover pieces. And the first thing that we're going to explore is, so you will see in this folder, hopefully, if I show over on the left-hand side, there are numbered files with the prefix E, because to make life easier, we're going to potentially import things out. Once we've solved a problem, we're not going to go and reinvent it in the later one. So I realized you can't import from a Python file that starts in a number. I'd forgotten that. So suddenly I had to change and add a letter to the front of all. So I thought E for exercise. In the solution folder, they're all S for solution, so I don't get confused as to which one I'm ever looking at. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at my first flow. So here we go. Now, you will notice at the moment that looks like 100% regular Python. And hopefully, it's fairly straightforward what it's doing. We've created an adding function. We've created a square a number function, and and then we've created a add and square function, which calls those two operations in sequence. And if we run this file, which I will now do, and let me put this back full screen. We get an answer. 4 plus 8 squared is 144. Who knew? Groundbreaking stuff. Or not. But illustrative that we don't have to worry about the logic of what's going on under the hood. We can all take that for granted. So how are we going to turn this into something that isn't just does a thing? Because if I go and do something daft, I don't know, I put if if true, and I'm going to forget to put my semicolon, or actually even I put a semicolon, but I don't actually do anything. That's bad Python. That should now break my code horribly at the level that, yep, there we go, I've got an error. I've got nothing. Now, I've got a standard error message to help track where it's gone wrong, but that's fairly straightforward. And in this simple enough case, that's easy to manage. But let's do something useful and start turning this into a pipeline that we can manage and monitor. So the first thing we need to do is from Prefect, import task and flow. And like I said, those are the #1 things that we are going to take in the whole process. Now, the addition is a nice bite-sized unit. We're just going to decorate that with task. We're going to square our number. That's also a simple task. And then we're going to add and square. And this is our workflow. This is the thing that's going to chain together a number of other things to make our lives easier. So we've then got @flow. And that is literally it. That's all I need to do to turn this into a prefect, I hope, if I've remembered the solution correctly. Again, pray to the demo gods. So if we run this one now, we should see a slightly different output where, hey, look at that. You've now got a fully logged engine running. We can see it's created, it's telling you where to go back out to the dashboard directly to monitor what's happened. It's even told you that it's finished. It actually managed to get through the whole workflow. It's broken down the individual, hopefully you can see, it's completing the tasks and it's completing the flow. So you're getting reports back. So now if I go and do my, you can see it's also given itself a unique name. Now, we'll get into it later, but you can declare names if you so desire to be more specific. But that means that you can track the individual runs. So if that one's called resolute anteater. So now if I put the if true statement into the squaring num part, but don't do anything properly, we can see that that's bad Python. This will run through, and you can see it failed. Well, it's actually not even letting me get to the, I don't know, if I do break, or I know what I do, if true, return none. So that's going to give me not a number, which is not going to then be able to square when it comes to the next stage. That helps if I don't mistype it. That should give me a more sensible break. And you can, well, actually, but you can sit, well, actually, it hasn't failed the way I wanted it to. That's not good enough. OK, let's try and do something else. I didn't test this part. You can tell. Let me return let me return an actual string of the number. That, I shouldn't be able to do maths with that anymore. There we go. Let's do that. Hopefully that then breaks.
You could raise a value error.
Yes, I could just raise an error and be more explicit about the but yeah, yes, let me do that as me trying to show off and just do something that would be an actual mistake you might have typed in somewhere. Doesn't work, clearly. So let's put that in. And OK, so we get our error messages, but it's also, when we go back, if I go back up far enough, you can actually see it's erroring in the logging from the actual code. And if I break out again, and I go back to the, where's it gone? Here it is, here's my dashboard. So if I scroll down, I might have to zoom out a little bit in order to make this. So if I go to my flow runs, let's do the past hour. That should restrict everything. So you can see also now, as a high overview, it's been running the add and square function, and you can see the ones that have succeeded, and you can see the ones that have failed, and there's those names. And if we start going in, and so we can then explore a run, and you can see it's broken it down. Those are our tasks. So we can see, again, what's coming through. You can see what order things got run in. You can see their unique times. You've got the timestamps. Again, you've got all of this straight out of the hood. You didn't have to write anything other than task and flow around your functions. And this is all lifted, all of that classic logging boilerplate taken away from you. You don't have to worry about it. And if we look down at the bottom, you can actually see the different pieces breaking apart. Now, there you can go into the task runs, and you can see that actually, therefore, it then even gives you that breakdown all the way down to the level of logging that you really want to check. I mean, these are really simple tasks. There's not a lot logging going on, but you can see that it's trying to do them. You can even then go into the task inputs. We didn't actually give any inputs, but it would actually tell you what did you pass to that function to help you start really interrogating and knowing what's gone through your pipeline. So hopefully that's starting to give you a taste of how much power we just got with very little coding. The hard part was getting the server stood up. So let's go back, and I'm going to add a little bit more detail onto this to give some examples. Where's my window gone? So what you can then do is I'm going to actually declare this. So I can give it a name, because I don't want it to try and just generate its own name. I'm going to say, in my case, Adam's Addition, to make it very clear that it's my name. And the task, squaring, for some reason. Now you can go deeper. We can, so when it comes to the flow, I'm going to say name equals demo flow. But you can also, and this is the thing, these are all optional parameters as to how much you want to put in as extra information for yourself. We can also put a longer form description in if we want. So we could put, did I not spell that right? Description equals PyData Prefect demo 1. Now, there's one extra thing I'm going to put on here. And it's kind of key to the fact that if I go back to the logs here, if I show you, notice how when it went through and was running, we had a print statement. We haven't returned anything, we just had a print statement. But we see it, but it's kind of broken out of the log file. So it's literally running on that command line. It's not automatically, can you see it here? That's the print statement, but it's not, if you like, being logged in exactly the same way. Now, one of the things you can do is you can use the Prefect logger. You can directly access it, and you can add extra information in, and I will show some examples of that later. But if you want to get really lightweight, quick, straight off, out of the thing, you can do inside of your flow, and you only have to do it, I think, in the very top flow, because flows can also call other flows. Tasks can also call other tasks. I'm not sure if tasks can call flows. I haven't tried that one. I don't think you can. But you can have subflows. You can nest these things down so that you can, again, the whole point is to organize the work into sensible batches so that you're monitoring and you understand what's going on and where there's potentially a problem. But if I do log prints equals true, we'll now rerun that same one. I will take out the value error because I don't want it to break on this occasion. And we will run this again. Now, I know I'm just hitting the play button. You could literally just be typing Python, the command line, the function name, just you're aware. Right, oh, that did not work. What did it? Raise type error function must be callable. Where did that? What have I done wrong? Oh, right. Oh, I didn't actually give it, yes, I didn't give it a name, I just typed a string in. Thank you very much. So let us run that again. So you can now see that the task runs have been named according to my naming convention that I've chosen, not how it's chosen to name them. But you can also see that we have here, embedded in exactly the same way, the logging of the print statement. And again, I haven't had to do anything other than turn on a flag in the top level flow, and I get that out of the box. Okay, so that's our first flow. I'm going to ask quickly, is there any questions? Have you followed that? Hopefully that was simple enough, because like I say, this is meant to be, you don't know what you're doing with Prefect. If you're a Prefect expert in the room, I already should be apologizing because you probably know all of this stuff. Okay. Oh, there's a question.
Can you just use the functions as normal as well? Like, can you continue to use add in another script as a standard?
I don't think so, because I think, well, I think it will report because it'll try and communicate out to the Prefect server that it can't act. So if you aren't running a Prefect server under the hood, it will suddenly give you a, because obviously if you haven't imported the task, you'll be importing that because it's still in the function. So you kind of, you have lost it. You can't, I don't think you can use it independently now of the Prefect data pipeline. I guess in theory you could kind of cheat the other way around. You could kind of almost import and redecorate individual functions, which is a bit messy. There might be a better way of doing it. I don't have enough knowledge to delve into that one. But, right, so that's all there. So the next thing I was going to show you, and let me just check back to my slides because I know I'm doing a lot of live coding. So, yay, we've created our first flow. Woohoo! Let's go slideshow, and let's move to the next one. So, this was that point. You can add detail to the task to log. This is an example, again, from the documentation that they have actually even created a function that generates task names because they want to explicitly put the timestamps onto the task names, not just the logging of the call, time it was called. But it kind of hopefully illustrates that you therefore have this flexibility of how do you want to set up these names. Because you actually have the task run names. You saw that you had like the anteater whatever. That's being randomly generated for you. You can write your own generator for them. The key thing there obviously is you want them to be unique. Otherwise, you're going to come into problems because that's how, under the hood in that database, it is identifying all the unique flow runs. As I kind of mentioned, you get logging straight out of the box. Certainly, if you do log prints equals true, because you can just be using print statements. If you want to directly do it, the extra import you need to do from Prefect is get run logger, and then you are able to, in any given flow or any given task, you can get, as you can see in this bottom part of the code here, you can get that logger, you pick it up, and then you can just use info and warning, the normal logger style commands, and then push whatever information you want out, and that will get picked up into that full data flow and managed by Prefect for you. So now we're going to go up a notch. Because it's all well and good, you see these toy examples, we've all seen them, of the quick start of, yay, this is all I need to do and it's up and running. But is it really reflective of a real world problem? Less so. So I've been ambitious. We still have 45 minutes left, so fingers crossed. You may not all get there with me, but like I say, the code is there that hopefully you will get there with me eventually. Feel free to, in fact, tweet me on it. Anybody who finishes this afterwards, I will happily accept tweets back saying, yes, I have it running. It will be interesting to see after the fact how many of you have given up and just abandoned all hope, and how many got all the way through to the end. But so let me put this out as effectively a business problem. I want to, I think I can disrupt the travel industry. I want to know when people are unhappy about the incumbent airlines. So I'm going to monitor. I found that online, there's this API that reports back all of the tweets about airlines. And that's our little get tweet hidden away function that we've got. That's great. That's there. Now, what I want to do is I kind of go with, OK, well, I need to pull that. That data is going to keep being updated as new data comes through. So we're going to need to get that data. We're going to publish it, actually, to a Kafka queue. Who here is familiar with Kafka? OK. For those who aren't familiar with Kafka, Kafka is a very scalable queuing engine. This is why we register with Upstash, because it gives you a free Kafka queue for the level of scale that we're going to use. What it means is that we are basically going to put messages into that, and that can then sit there independently, and we're going to then write a different function that is going to operate as a consumer, what they call a Kafka consumer. So you have Kafka producers, you have Kafka consumers. This isn't a Kafka tutorial, so don't worry, I've written all of that code for you. I'm not going to ask anybody to delve into that. The consumer can then go and get that data, and it gets it in the order it arrived in the queue based upon the topic that you've labeled things as. We're then going to take that, perform some sentiment analysis with an off-the-shelf spacey model, say, oh, there's this text. It gets this score. Is this a positive tweet? Is it a negative tweet? And then we're going to push that analysis out to our static store, which is then going to be in MongoDB, which again, we've got an Atlas account, free tier, because I wanted it, again, to not have to worry about everything's running locally. We're just going to attach out to those services. That's fundamentally what we're going to do. But now that's a lot of stuff and a lot of steps, so let's break that problem down. So now we're into full demo building. OK. So first things first. If I go find my code again. So let me close the first flow. And I think I can close actually that setup. So now we're going to go into exercise 2. So if I move this down, this is a pure Python pipeline. I'm just going to walk through the concept of what we kind of would want to do. Now, I appreciate that time's gone on. How far have people got? Has anybody managed to now get to the level that they have their own server up and running? OK, there are a couple of people. OK. I may skip over one of the bits of interactivity because it's more Python than it is Prefect. And since not all of you are able to follow directly along, it might not be worth doing. So what we have here, and this is, I wanted to illustrate kind of going back to that point that you start off from how do I solve the problem in front of me, rather than how do I do the full deployment. So you can see here, I'm actually pointing straight away at the top. This is actually just going to go and pull the data file that I've got running in the background that's being transmitted out. It's like, OK, we've got a static version. We're doing our development. We're figuring out how we solve it. We don't have to worry about the live streaming. So let's just get that developed first. And so this is the Python piece. And so we're going to load the file. I'm in the mindset, though, that I know I want this to be a pipeline. So I'm going to already break these things down. So I'm going to load the file. I'm going to need to calculate the sentiment. We're going to need to do some text pre-processing, probably. We're going to need to do a bit of cleaning up. So we know what people are like on Twitter. They love their emojis. So let's get the emojis out and turn them into a sensible English word of some variety so that we might interpret some meaning from it, because we're using a lightweight sentiment analyzer. We're not using an LLM or anything that's going to understand emojis. So you can see that smiley face has been turned into smile. Wink has been turned into wink. All written for you. Equally, here's just a basic stop word list. We don't care about these words. You can, in theory, use your favorite stop word list. And then the other processing steps that we'd want to go to. Sensible to let's lowercase all the text, that we have it all in a standard format. Here's a function. So it says to be implemented properly. This will run because it's just returning the text at the moment. If you really want to, if you look in the solution, I've kind of added these extra bits. This is for those who just wanted to get in and do a bit more coding, and I appreciate not everybody's where we need to be. We're stripping out URLs, and we're just going to replace it with a fact there was a web address here, because we don't necessarily want to remove knowledge that there was anything there, but it's not going to help us in any of our sentiment analysis to have all of these big long strings of web addresses. We're going to do the same for user handles, because we're not really tracking individual users for doing the sentiment analysis at the very least. replace emoji function. Again, at your leisure, you can fill that one in, or you can copy the solution straight in. And the last bit is lemmatizing the text. So we're going to use a word lemmatizer off the shelf to just go and do everything that we want. And then this effectively is our actual, what would become our flow, because this is the chaining together of all those individual operations. And then as a little test case, if this is the case, let's go and do it, run it over the whole file. So let me just launch this because it takes a little bit of time, not too much. What we're basically doing, we'll see when it all comes out, hopefully, is we're going to loop over. There's a decent number of tweets in there. We're going to calculate, we're going to clean up the text for every row. We're going to print out some samples. We're going to calculate the sentiment, and then we're going to actually look at the group. So the interesting thing, if you were paying close attention when I gave you the example of what our Twitter tweet engine was, there was an airline sentiment field on there. So effectively, the airline had already gone with, this is positive. And that's because this data set is used also for you to train your own model. But it was like, OK, well, now we can assess how well our spacey off-the-shelf model works. I should have added, there's an extra step here. If you don't have in that environment the spacey small model installed, you'll have to do a Python -m spacey download the name of the English small model, and it'll pull it down. It's not very large, so it should come down very quickly. I will add that back in the instructions after the end of this, and if anybody gets stuck when we take a little bit of a break later on, I can help. Yes, you will also need to do that as well. Thank you for flagging that one up. Let me see, this is still ticking. Whilst this is ticking, does anybody have any questions? Is it all making some semblance of sense? Good. See, this is when you're really nervous as the demo gods. It's like that. I know I tested this, and I think this worked, but if this now falls over, this is going to be really embarrassing. You know, you're here meant to be teaching these people and showing them how to do stuff. All I can say is we all get it wrong from time to time. So OK, while that's ticking over, I'm just going to, we'll come back to highlight that that worked. Oh, no, there we go, speak of the devil, there we go. So you can see it's run through, it's given us a lot of statistics. And the good news is, we can see, if you're looking at the mean, that on average, our negative tweets are slightly negative. You'll notice they're not brilliantly negative on average. But there's definitely a distribution between the neutral. So our model is doing something sensible. Yay, we have a sentiment analysis model that we can kind of trust and that we're going to use in some variety in production. But this is now, like I say, that very first step where you're the data scientist or whoever, and you're going with, I just need to figure out how to solve the problem, not how do I engineer the solution. So now, it may not be your responsibility. You may be working with a machine learning engineer. You may be working with a data engineer. But if you're the data scientist, it's also good to know this is how you can do it. And also, you can maybe be able to get there a little bit quicker, because I'm showing you the tools that you can get there quicker. So if we swap out that to, if you know, this is effectively exactly the same piece. But now what we've got is I've decorated them with tasks. And I've given them some kind of names so that I can track them more easily. So we have lowercase. So again, this is the, let me open up the actual solution, actually, because I'm not going to, I don't think we're all at a level that you can all directly follow along. So it makes it easier if I just show you the solution, I think. So I'm going to copy my solution to make sure it's in the right place and put it back into the exercise. OK, so here we go. Now, if I move this down. So what we have now is, if we go through, we're going to call a task, which we've decorated a task for the lowercasing. We're calling it lowercase. The strip URLs one, we're calling strip URLs. Like I say, none of this is, in some respects, really exciting. Once you learn this, it's like, okay, so I just put that in front of it, and it magically works. And we're going to come all the way through. And here's one of the ones I wanted to add, is this is one of the parameters I haven't shown you before. Retries. And this goes back to that point that I was making about in the API demo example that I've given you, it falls over 25% of the time on purpose. If you just had your function and you had your task, if it didn't get something that it could process, it's going to raise an error and it's going to break out of the flow and it's done. One of the other nice things about Prefect that you get straight out of it is that you can turn on retries. And you can turn on retries at the level of how many of these do you want to do. You can also set how long do you want to wait between each one. So you can kind of go with, okay, we know that we've got a slightly flaky web endpoint, try X number of times, wait this much. There are operators in there which do, again, straight off the hood, you can import them, exponential backoff. If you want something more complicated as a strategy, it's already, in many cases, written there for you. And so you get those, again, without having to worry about the implementation explicitly yourself. You get to just use them. So we're doing all of the same stuff. You can see that in this case, I've given an example in the solution of directly using the logger, like we saw on the slide. It's doing very similar things to just printing when you've got log prints on, but I kind of wanted to make sure I highlighted it. We're then calculating the sentiment. We're calculating the sentiment analysis, and we're doing the full processing. And so what we actually have, actually I should highlight, this is a processing the text flow. We then have a calculating the sentiment task, and then we have the master flow is actually the sentiment analysis. And what we're going to do is we're going to call as a subflow the processing text, so we can kind of hide away some of the nuance if we don't care about it. If it's all working, we don't want to see it. And I'll run this now, and then we will see, because this is going to, we just have a simple example. So this one's going to run quicker than the previous one. Here's an example tweet. This is the worst day ever. A Airlines is completely screwed. Unsmiley face, I'm not a happy bunny, worstdayever.com. So we, beautiful example. We've got web addresses that need to go. We have handles that need to be replaced. It's illustrating a load of the things that we want to illustrate. Let me run this one, fingers crossed. And here you can see it's whizzing through. It's doing everything. It's logging. You can see a sentiment score at the bottom. But the key one I want us to step back out and look at now is, oh, I just maximized that one. I meant to switch, is if we now go back and we look at our dashboard here, and I look at our flow runs. Again, let me just filter this back to the past hour. That limits our runs. So there you go. So we have, now we had a subflow and a flow. So actually what's happened is that it's reported both. So if I click on the sentiment analysis, so cooperative parrot, this is how it initially looks when you're looking at the task diagram. You can see it, oh, it does data processing, but you can see it's actually got its own unique identifier as well, because that flow operates semi-independently. It's being launched, but it's got its own queuing piece. And some of this comes from the fact that in different parts of Prefect, and again, I won't be able to illustrate it today, is you can do concurrency. So you can start setting up parallel flows that multiple things can be happening at the same time, but then they're waiting for things to complete before you join everything together at the end. And so you can get into these much more complicated patterns and have control of it. But if I click on the expander here, there's, this is a problem when I'm this zoomed in. Let me zoom out a little bit. Yeah. If I drag it all around, you can now see it's actually expanding out that workflow again. So you can still see everything. And if we look down at the bottom of the page, here's all of the intermediate pieces. You can see that we're logging the input text. We've got the output scores. We can actually also go in and you see the run. The only task run you see under here, of course, is the calculate sentiment, because the other tasks are inside the other flow. So you would need to look. So if I go to subflow runs, it gives you the link back to the subflow runs. I can click in there, and suddenly there's all the detail about the subflow runs. And so it's all still accessible, and you can navigate it through in a relatively manageable way. How's everybody doing? We've got 30 minutes left. I haven't destroyed you yet, I hope. I appreciate you're not all able to follow along. Thank you for bearing with me. Especially those who are literally coding on paper in the far corner. I mean, we've got some people who are doing this on a mobile phone effectively. We've got people who are actually doing a coding tutorial with paper. That is dedication. Hopefully, like I say, everything should be here that works. If any of this doesn't work afterwards and you get stuck on anything, because it's going to be a while before these videos go up, reach out to me and I will do my best to set you back on the straight and narrow, because I appreciate this was all a bit last minute. But obviously, we're not there yet. So what I need to do is, in the last 30 minutes, great, we've proven the processing pipeline. But I went a bit ambitious. I said we want to be streaming stuff out and we want to be putting stuff other places. So I'm going to go to Upstash, where hopefully many of you have accounts. So if you go to Upstash, and I'm going to log in. This is where Upstash says, why are all these people coming off this Wi-Fi address? Are we having a DDoS attack from a random place in London near Tower Hill? So the reason why I'm coming here is because this is where you, so I have gone into, I've clicked on the Kafka button at the top. You can see that actually there are, if I go to one that I haven't already set up, so Vector, for example, you can see I don't have a vector database set up. If I click Create Index, I would now create one. Kafka, I already prepared. So I could create a new cluster, so if you haven't done it already, which you wouldn't have done because I haven't given you the instruction, you would click Create Cluster. You would type in the name. I've called mine Prefect-tutorial, all lowercase. You can choose your region. I think I put mine in Ireland in order to keep it close to me. And I left it, I think, as a single replica because I want just the free tier and I'm not paying for anything. Yeah, multi-replica for production use. This is just testing, so I just did a single replica. And then after that, it allows you to create a topic. So if I'm obviously not going to set up another cluster. I'll just click in to my cluster, and you can see here's your credentials. You've got so there's the endpoint, which you're going to need to copy into the configuration file, and I'll show you an example of how I've done the configuration at the moment to make life semi-secure, not perfectly secure, because you're all going to see all of the answers. You can copy your usernames and password out that you'll have set up in order to be able to connect to all of these things. But you also nicely get, instantly, in your language of choice, they happily help explain how to get connected to this stuff. So you can kind of use this. If you're not familiar with these things, they kind of get you started pretty quickly. And yeah, I don't think I need to explain anything else more about that. On the usage, this is kind of useful when you want to check what's been running. You can see the testing that's been going on. You can see when I got really magically busy in the week when I thought I had plenty of time to develop this for today, because nothing got pushed on Wednesday or Thursday. The topics. So this is, I've created a topic in advance, as I've said, called Raw Airline Tweet. Again, I've just given it. In this case, you can edit the config. I've done it that it only keeps any messages I put in it for an hour, which basically means that everything I've done previously is already flushed out, so I don't have to think about anything being in there. That's more about how you set up Kafka, so we're not going to go into it. The default of keeping it for a week is not going to matter for those of you here right now. But that's where you go to edit it if you want to, the details. Equally, your credentials, if you need to create new credentials, you can come in and you can get a new username and password and things like that. So that's Upstash. I'm going to quickly also show MongoDB. So I'm going to go to Atlas, and I'm going to sign in because I already have an account. I'm going to do it through my Google account again. When you signed to a Prefect tutorial, you didn't think you were going to get Kafka and MongoDB in the cloud as well, did you? Here's my environment. The former business I used to work with was a big Mongo user, which is how I ended up getting familiar with Atlas. You can create a free tier database here. which I think it can hold a maximum of 500 megabytes of data. That's going to be fine for what we need. I've created, you have to create a cluster, so you choose the free tier cluster. I think if I go to, if I go and to create cluster, to just illustrate it, to create a new one, so if you ever want a cost-effective but slightly more scalable version, the serverless actually works really nicely. It's paying you for the amount of data you use and the amount of queries you make. So if you're not doing huge amounts of data volume, it's a very nice way if you need more than that 500 megabytes. I have no involvement with MongoDB. I'm not selling their services. If you go to the shared version, you can effectively choose a free tier. Well, this is not, I think it's because I've already got a free one spun up, because you're limited in how many free databases you can set up. So I can't show you exactly, but you can find the configuration relatively straightforwardly, hopefully, to get the free tier set up. So if I just go back, so inside here, if I then go to my database, similarly, if you click connect, you can get toy examples if you're not familiar with how you can get set up. So if you view, oh, no, I didn't want to hit that link. If there's the Python example, there we go. View full code sample shows you what the default libraries are to install, how to go and set up, how to stick the password in, how to create your URI, and so on and so forth. You may need to so if I go inside of it now, so here we are, you hopefully, so what I've done is I've created, under collections. So under collections, I have already got a lot of files. Actually, I'm going to delete my collection. So if you're not familiar with MongoDB, collections are, if you like, the equivalent of tables, almost, in a SQL database. It's the fundamental place where you store things. I'm just going to delete it so that we don't, so I kind of prove my point that nothing is here when it comes to running things. So I'm just going to drop that, and now we don't have any data in our collections. So as we move through, when it comes to storing it, if the collection that you try and access from Python isn't there, it effectively creates it when it goes to do it. It's quite stable in that way that you declare where you want the data to go, and if it doesn't already exist, it will just create that collection. And because MongoDB is, I'm trying to remember, I think they kind of like to put, it's not schema-less, it's schema-free, in the sense that you're not locked to a schema up front. You can add new fields dynamically to your collection without having to rebuild the whole thing. So it just learns from your JSON. So with those two things up in the background, that enables us to now get back to our coding example. So if I go to, where's Visual Studio Code? So let me delve into, so if I look at config, yeah, so I've hashed these out, so I need to copy these back across. So this is where I am now foolishly sharing, and we'll have to delete all of these keys after the fact, certainly before any videos go online. We need, so if you kind of remember on Upstash, it kind of had that declaration of this is where the server is. That is our server address that we need to capture. We need a username and password to access. Again, that can be generated from the access keys on that page. So if we put all of those inside of our Kafka file, I've also put some of the standard security protocols and mechanisms just so that we know that we've got the right ones stored there, and we can just pull them through in a consistent fashion and don't have to type them into every single function that we want to use in the future. So the other config that I have there, no, that's not, is there's a MongoDB config. This, again, as you saw, the example in the Python code was a lot nicer in the sense that they just create a full URI for you to connect to. I have declared what the name of the database is that I've created there, which is Prefect tutorial. So I'm just going to put those into my, no, that's not the correct one. That's the correct one. And put those in here. I've also put a collection name, but I think I hard-code the collection name later on anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So, okay, so we kind of now, I'm trusting, possibly not right now, but we have our web services up and ready to take data. So we've got 20 minutes left. We can still do this. We can get there. So the next piece that we need to do is, okay, we have a sentiment pipeline that we know can process this data, but we need to get to the data. So the next thing we're going to worry about is here. And so this is now, exercise 3A, Kafka tweet publisher. It's all in the name. So, like I said, this isn't a Kafka tutorial, so I've written some of these tasks up front and done all of the work around them. Some of the others have blanks, so again, you can pick this up and have a go on these exercises yourself after the fact, if you like. I will copy the solution in shortly. So we are going to go, so if you remember, we're running our Twitter website locally at localhost on port 8000. We've got a Kafka topic that I created, which is called raw airline tweet. That's where it's ready to receive data. So we've got a task which effectively is now going to do this. It's going to do a bit of logging. You can see it's using the Kafka producer function to take a load of those connection pieces to give us a producer object. And then effectively, all we're doing is we're expecting to pass into that function a load of JSON messages that we're going to get from our website. So we're going to loop through all those messages, and for each message, we're going to publish it to the queue. That's all we're going to do. Nothing fancy, nothing crazy. We're then going to just flush out the producer when it's done, and it's going to log some information saying, yay, that's all worked. And then we have a second task, which is now getting the data in the first place. So this is going and hitting up that airline tweet data. If we only get one tweet, initially when I conceived of this, I thought I might send you multiple records back at a time, and then I didn't have enough time to implement that. So that's why I've had to put a caveat of check what the data type is and send. If it's only one, send it back as a list. Otherwise, construct the list. So don't be hopefully confused by that. And that's effectively everything that needs to do. That looks cool. That looks great. Let's go and run that. I mean, like I say, I've done all the work for you. You know, woohoo. So if I run this one, well, hey, oh, it's gone through, and I think I foolishly didn't go. I found this a little bit hit and miss on Upstash. That's one thing I was going to say is on messages. In theory, clear logs. Let me try and do this again. In theory, it monitors, and you can kind of get a screenshot of what's going on. So I'll try and send another. Oh, that's the wrong one. Another message through. There we go. Oh, yeah, and it's found something this time. You can definitely see, because you can see it's kind of logged out, and it's gone and found a tweet, and it says it's successfully published it to the queue. So let's see, did that show up? Like I say, I found it to be a little bit hit and miss as to whether I see those updates. It's a new feature in Upstash, and I don't think it's 100% tested yet, because it doesn't always work. Okay, trust me. Oh, sorry. Yeah, possibly. It's been a bit hit and miss as to how sometimes I've seen it work, and sometimes the fact's like, oh, you need to already have this open and loaded. At the moment, that's the magic thing that we need to address, because trust me that they're in the Kafka queue right now. They are there. The issue is, I don't want to have to keep running this flow all the time, continuously. That's going to get really, really tedious. I want to monitor this data. So this is where step 2 comes into play. And step 2, this is why there's a part B of this tutorial, if I just close these two so that I've got them out of the way, is we actually want to create a scheduled deployment of this. We want to say every X period of time, go and get me some data. That's what I want it to do. So you can do this. There are some great ways of doing it. You can do, so there's a version called deployments, which I initially considered, which requires you to have your code somewhere accessible on the web because it kind of pulls it down and then successfully does things. But that was going to get really complicated with secrets management, and I didn't want us to have to worry about that. So have that in the back of your mind that if you want to go to production, that's where you would be going. And so you need to look at the deployment section in the documentation a little bit more. But what we're going to do here is, these are all the same functions. But what I have at the bottom is that if this is the primary piece of code, we're not just running stream airline tweet to Kafka. We are going to serve it. So we're going to serve that flow out. And now we have to give it some information. So I'm going to give it a new name. I'm going to call this monitoring airline tweets 2, because I did a monitoring airline tweets last night in testing, and I want to make sure we can see this one pop up. Tags. The interesting thing here is you can actually add extra information if you're trying to label up so that you can track what these things are. So if we do PyData workshop, I'm going to do live demo. There we go, there's an extra tag on it. Now, parameters need to be passed in this case. So what I'm actually going to do is it's basically going to take in the tweet URL, which I've gone and stored as a right at the top anyway. If I come all the way back up, we've got the airline URL, we have the Kafka topic. So I'm going to say the tweet URL that's coming in now as a parameter is going to be our airline URL get tweet, and we're going to do Kafka topic. And I'm going to set the interval to being 3 seconds. So if this works, it should create a deployment inside of our server, which we'll see in a different place, which actually then just keeps running and keeps building this. So let me just create a new terminal to specifically run that one from. And so I'm going to launch that the old-fashioned way, because this is going to keep sort of serving. So I kind of need to not block up my automatic execution. So I'm going to do Kafka E03B Kafka. Now, fingers crossed. So there you go. We get a different message. Your flow stream airline tweet to Kafka is being served and polling for scheduled runs. So here we go. It's actually now live going, and we're going to see it, and it's gone again, and it's gone again, and it's gone again. I'm not touching it, I promise. So if we go back now to our dashboard, which is over here, and I'll go back up to the top run, and let's do past hour. You're going to see that there's now a steady stream of stuff coming through. And we can start going. So if I go to the deployments tab, we have monitoring airline tweets. I don't know why that's not 2. It might be because I might not have resaved it before I fully updated it. But if I go to flow runs, I think, you can actually see we now have a different type here. We have scheduled ones. It's already planning a few 3-second runs ahead of time. And you can see, hopefully from these timestamps, actually it's rounding everything up a little bit. So you're not seeing quite the 3-second intervals. But you can see it's auto-scheduled. It's got the PyData workshop tag on it. All of that information has come through. Now, if you want to, if it was like, oh, crap, did we really want it to be running quite this frequently? What do we want to do? You can come over here and hit pause. You can turn that off. You can come in and you can run a quick run if you're doing a testing of, okay, we've changed something somewhere. You can come in and edit, and this is then those parameters. I really don't, it doesn't seem to quite, let me go back a second, and let's really double check that I'm doing things properly and not cheating. So let me save this to make sure it's got the edits, and I'm going to go back here, and let's go back up to our deployments, and I'm actually going to delete this deployment. Gone. No deployment there. Refresh. Create a deployment to get started. Let's really check that I actually wasn't cheating and that this was all stuff that I had already done. I had made, this is one I made earlier. There you are. So if I rerun the deployment script, you can see now it actually says 2. It's because I didn't do a save after I made those edits, and so it just tagged it onto the old pipeline, and there we are. We're now whizzing through, and it should now have the live demo tag. So that's definitely keeping me honest. And now you can see again, they're coming through. Let me just come up here, and you can see we've got a live demo tag on it as well now. And I can zoom in. You can see these are the ones that are running, because some of them are a little bit, it's running every 3 seconds, but it takes a bit of time for some of this stuff to go through. So actually some of them are even running on top of each other, that nothing has to wait for the other one to finish necessarily before it comes through, which can be a problem if you've got too much of a backlog, because you're going to overload your service, but hey, that's a problem for a different day. So I'm hyper aware that we are in the final stages, and I've still got one last piece that I need to get us to the end piece, that we actually have our data. So that's all running, and that's now happily running in the background, so we're just going to leave that there. So last part of our journey together today is we still need to, and so I'm going to switch back to this terminal here, because this one should still be the one connected for when I play, is we kind of need to do a similar thing of, okay, great, well, we've got all of that on a queue now, but we need to do something with it, if you remember. We put that work in creating our sentiment analysis pipeline. What are we going to do? So this is a very similar function. Now I've said I'm going to cheat again. I'm going to go and take my solution and put it straight over the top, because if there's one thing I've learned from writing a tutorial at the last minute, is timings are not perfect for how much work anybody can get done in the room when you're explaining it at the same time. So let me minimize the config. There's the solution. Let me open this one, copy that code, and put it into here. Ooh, no, that's the wrong one to change, because that is the, do that. This is the one I want to. Okay, so what we are doing here is we still need to import our Kafka configs, because we've got to get a consumer now to go and get that data back from the queue. We're also going to pick up our MongoDB access points, so that we can actually, we know where we're going to sync our data to, if you like. And like I said, the reason for renaming, I couldn't be bothered copying and pasting and putting all the sentiment pipeline back in. We can just import that flow back into this process, because we'd already done the debug and we know that it's there. And again, would you really want to put everything in one big giant file anyway? No, you don't want to do that. So principles there that we can again get to keep this fairly simple. So we're going to go out to the raw airline tweet, and I think it was collection name. I can also import. I think I'm going to might make a slight edit here. So we're going to go out, and the first function is, again, this isn't a tutorial about how to access MongoDB. This is effectively how PyMongo goes and gets a client so it can do the connection out to Mongo. This function is basically kind of almost doing exactly the same as the other one, but this is the consumer, not the producer. So the same connection pieces, it's going to return us a consumer object so that we can go and poll it to get information out. So this is the task to write. We've done it very simply. We're going to connect to our database. We're going to create a collection. Like I said, that's the equivalent, if you like, of a SQL table. And we're just going to say insert one record, because we know that we've only got one message coming at a time in this process. So we're just going to write one message at a time. And now the extra task, and this is one that I kind of had left for people to do originally, is, okay, actually, we were getting scores back. Maybe we want to classify that actually as positive, negative, and neutral. We want to set some bounds. So I've just chosen some thresholds. We know those aren't perfect, because you saw what the distribution scores were like the first time, but it does something. So that should do something useful for us. So it'll convert, and we'll get another is a print statement. So when we turn log prints on, we'll get something fed back. And then, so we then need to do the actual consumption And I've done this as a task at the moment. And I'm not actually sure I've done this brilliantly because I'm not a Kafka expert. What we are doing here effectively is we are starting to, so we're basically launching a consumer that's going to sit there and just listen. It's going to continually poll with a 5-second timeout, which actually possibly should be a little bit longer, so let's turn that into a 10-second timeout. And it's basically going to say, have you got any new messages? And if it does, it pulls those messages down. We then loop over the messages. We calculate our sentiment score using our sentiment pipeline. We create our label. We update our data record, and then we write it out to Mongo. So those are other tasks that we've declared earlier on. So they are subtasks of this master task. And then that master task is just inside of the flow, which is the monitor airline tweets. I've said processes them every 30 seconds because originally I was thinking that I would do something else with this. Instead, it's going to launch and go. We have 3 minutes left, so fingers crossed. I'm now going to hit play. And I'm actually holding my breath. And it looks like it's running. It's consuming, it's finding, it seems to be doing things, So, but we don't want to look at the command line. We've just gone and create a whole nice server dashboard for us to go and do all of this stuff. So let us jump over to back here. So here's our dashboard. And there we go. Oh, we can see stream airline tweet to Kafka 2 minutes and 15 seconds ago. Let's have a look at the flow runs, what's going on. Past hour. Oh, look, we've got data pre-processing, we've got sentiment analysis coming through. So you can still see that the scheduling is still clearly going on in the background. And if I just look, you go into the sentiment analysis, and we can see, oh, that's not really the deployment, it's the flows. Flow runs, sorry, I wanted to look at. Data pre-processing sentiment. Yeah, okay, so if I look on one of these, so yeah, you can see that it's coming through, we're processing. And the proof in the pudding, to, again, convince you that I'm not taking you all for granted, if I refresh this, there should be a new data collection that's appeared. There is. And there is data in it. If you look here, there is currently 43 documents. Can you just see that, 43? And there's examples, and you can see it has a sentiment score, and it has a label. And if I refresh that, that number should go up to, it's at 54. It's all running live, and I'm not doing anything. We actually got there with 1 minute to spare for my closing remarks. So thank you all for bearing with me. I appreciate that was, in some respects, a lot to take in, and there wasn't as much practical as I would have liked. We kind of went, key problem is scheduling. It was all well and good that we'd written it. We need to actually then launch it and deploy it. Stretch goal, because I realized I didn't stay up any longer, because it was like, it'll be a miracle if I get through to this much. Inside of that Docker compose is a Streamlit dashboard, which is looking at a small version of those tweets and creating word clouds and stuff. If we'd had more time, the last part of the exercise would be now go and get the data in a live way and see these refresh and the word cloud grow and do all of the crazy stuff that you would all gone like, wow, which unfortunately we didn't quite get to, but you can all be ambitious enough to take that with you. Like I said, we didn't have time to get to, you can do parallel processing in Dask, you can get concurrency up, you can manage your secret storages. Prefect is native to things like Kubernetes. They have thought about how do you put this on that architecture. The point is you can run it locally, and then you should be able to get out onto things. You can start using dbt runner if you want to be using dbt to actually manage your SQL database uplifts. You can run Docker containers. There's lots more to learn. My company who've let me come here today would not forgive me if I didn't get to this slide. If you want to come and fight financial crime with me at Comply Advantage, we are currently recruiting for staff data scientist and also for data scientist roles. We're literally only just starting the screening process, so we're still accepting applications. If you want to know more, you can come and talk to me after the fact. If anyone wants to take a photograph, quickly take a photograph. Nobody wants a job. Okay, I did my duty. I put the advert out. Thank you very much for listening to me. I will be around all weekend because I'm one of the co-organisers of the conference. Come talk to me if you've got any questions. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you've got any feedback, I'd also appreciate it because it's the first time I've run through this, as you've gathered. Thank you very much.